Hey, welcome to the Explainer. So today we're going to talk about a really powerful and deeply human way of understanding the world around us. It's a kind of research that cares just as much about stories and meaning as it does about stats and numbers. All right, let's jump right in.
Okay, let me ask you something. When you hear the word researcher, what's the first thing you picture? I'm willing to bet it's someone in a white lab coat, right? Surrounded by beakers and all that scientific gear. And look, that's definitely one way to make discoveries. But what if I told you that some of the biggest, most profound insights we have about our social world, about culture, politics, how organizations work, they come from a totally different kind of investigation?
So to really get this, we've got to look at a pretty fundamental split in how we even approach knowledge. It really boils down to one simple question. Are you starting with an idea you want to test, or are you starting from scratch to build a brand new one? And this really lays it out perfectly. You've got two totally different paths to knowledge here. On one hand, you have what we might think of as the traditional scientist. They start with a hypothesis, a theory, and then they go out and collect data to see if it's right. But on the other hand, you have the interpretive researcher, and they're much more like a detective. They start with the clues, the interviews, the observations, all that messy real-world stuff, and they slowly piece it all together to build a theory that actually explains what's happening. And that right there, that's the absolute heart of it. Interpretive research isn't about proving an old idea right or wrong. No, it's about building a new one. It's a journey of discovery, you could say. You're building a theory from the ground up, using all the rich, complex, messy details you find in the real world. Okay, so this leads us to the next big idea. Because this approach, it's not just a different toolkit or a set of methods, it's a completely different philosophy about what reality even means. You see, that more traditional scientific approach, we call it positivist research, it assumes there's this one single objective reality out there that we can all measure. But the interpretive view, well, it kind of says, hold on a second. It argues that our social world isn't a fixed thing. It's constantly being shaped and reshaped by our experiences, our language, our shared understandings. The point is, you just can't separate what you're studying from the context it's happening in. All right, now here's something we really need to clear up, because it's a super common mix-up. People often use the words interpretive and qualitative like they're the same thing. They're not. Think of it like this. Qualitative data, stuff like interviews, observations, field notes, that's the evidence you're collecting. But interpretive research, that's the philosophical lens you're using to analyze that evidence. It's how you make sense of it all and find the deeper meaning. And this is a huge shift in thinking. I mean, in a lab, the goal is to remove the human element as much as possible, right? To be objective. But in interpretive research, the researcher is the main instrument. Their ability to listen, to build trust, to observe things nobody else sees, and to make sense of all these complicated social dynamics, that's absolutely critical to the whole thing. The researcher isn't some detached outsider, they're literally part of the toolkit. So what does this actually look like in the wild, in practice? Let's take a look at a couple of classic ways this kind of research gets done. Okay, first step is ethnography. The best way to think about this is deep, deep immersion. The researcher doesn't just pop in for a visit. Nope. They embed themselves in a community or a culture for a long, long time. We're talking months, sometimes even years. The classic example everyone knows is Jane Goodall. She didn't just watch chimpanzees with binoculars from afar. She lived right there with them to truly understand their social world from the inside out. And the whole point of this deep dive is to create something called a thick description. It's not just a list of facts. It's a rich, detailed story that captures the feelings, the hidden meanings, the social rules, everything. It's so detailed that when you read it, you can almost feel what it was like to be there yourself. Then there's another really cool method called action research. And here, the researcher is anything but a passive observer. They're an active participant. They actually work inside an organization to help solve a real-world problem. And they do it by going through this cycle. First, they diagnose what's going on. Then they plan a course of action. Then they actually do it. They take the action. After that, they evaluate what happened. And finally, and this is the key part, they focus on learning from the whole experience. It's all about generating insights that actually connect theory to practice. Now, as you can probably guess, this kind of deep, immersive work has some really unique strengths. But it's not all easy. It also comes with some pretty significant challenges. So why would anyone go to all this trouble? Well, because it's hands down the best way to uncover the hidden why behind really complex social situations. Think about things like office politics or the dynamics of a neighborhood. It's also perfect when you're exploring a totally new area where there aren't any existing theories, or when you're studying a unique one-time event. And maybe most importantly, it helps you discover the questions you didn't even know you needed to ask.
But yeah, there are definitely trade-offs. For one, this kind of work takes a ton of time and resources. It also requires a researcher who is incredibly skilled and self-aware, because the risk of their own biases creeping in is really high. And here's the big one. Because the findings are so deeply connected to one specific situation, you can't just take them and say, this is true for everyone everywhere. That's not the point. The goal here is deep, rich understanding, not creating broad, universal laws.
So this brings up a really important question, right? If it's all about interpretation and specific contexts, how do we know if the research is actually any good? How can we tell if it's rigorous?
Well, the answer is that we don't just throw the idea of rigor out the window. We redefine it. So instead of asking if a study is reliable in the traditional sense, we ask if it's dependable. Instead of external validity, can we apply it everywhere? We look for transferability. Can these insights be useful in other similar situations? And maybe the most important shift is what happens instead of internal validity. Which brings us to this idea of credibility. See, a lab experiment tries to prove with certainty that A caused B. But for interpretive research, credibility asks a much simpler and maybe even more powerful question. Are the findings believable to the very people who lived that experience? Does the researcher's explanation actually ring true to them? So, when it's all said and done, what's the big takeaway here? It's that interpretive research gives us this incredibly vital lens for understanding our world. It's a powerful reminder that if we really want to get a handle on the complexities of human life, on motivation, on culture, we need more than just numbers. We absolutely need stories. We need context, and we need to understand the meaning people make of their own lives. And I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Which of these tells a more complete truth? A statistic that tells you the exact poverty rate in a country, or the rich, detailed life story of one family who's actually experiencing it? The answer is, well, maybe the most complete truth isn't found in one or the other, but somewhere in the space between the two.